The Battle of Wavre. When we think of Napoleon Bonaparte finally packing up his bags and losing his empire forever, everyone immediately points to the Battle of Waterloo. But the real reason Napoleon got served his eviction notice didn't actually happen at Waterloo. It happened down the road, at the Battle of Wavre. In the year 1815, Napoleon gave his marshal, a guy named Grouchy, a very specific chore. Take a third of the French army, chase down the fleeing Prussians, and absolutely do not let them join the main fight. Grouchy took this literally. So literally, in fact, when the Prussians left a tiny, noisy decoy force at Wavre to distract him, Grouchy spent the entire day fiercely battling this skeleton crew. Meanwhile, his officers could literally hear the massive, earth-shaking cannons going off at Waterloo just a few miles away, and begged him to march over and help. Grouchy basically went full middle management, checked his clipboard, said, "Nope, boss said chase these guys," and kept fighting a meaningless skirmish. Because of this monumental display of malicious compliance in 1815, the real Prussian army sneaked away, flanked Napoleon, and permanently rewrote the map of Europe. The Battle of the Granicus. We almost didn't have an Alexander the Great. We almost had an Alexander the guy who died in his 20s because he skipped the tutorial. In the year 334 BC, a 22-year-old Alexander faced off against the Persian Empire at the river Granicus. Instead of a careful tactical approach, Alexander just screamed, charged his horse across a muddy river, and went straight up a slippery bank right into the absolute thickest part of the elite Persian cavalry. It was pure chaos. While Alexander was distracted, a Persian noble named Spithridates rode up behind him, raised a massive battle axe, and swung it down with everything he had, perfectly cleaving right through Alexander's shiny helmet. Alexander was entirely dazed. Before the noble could deliver the fatal second strike, Alexander's bodyguard, Clytus the Black, swooped in and completely chopped off the Persian's arm. If Clytus had been 1 second slower in 334 BC, there is no conquest of Persia, no Hellenistic age, and the entire cultural foundation of the Western world gets cancelled in Season 1. The Battle of Diu. In the early 1500s, the global spice trade was a massive, highly lucrative monopoly controlled by Arab, Venetian, and Indian merchants. Then, the Kingdom of Portugal decided they wanted the whole pie. They sent a fleet of just 18 ships into the Indian Ocean. The existing superpowers understandably panicked at the audacity and formed a massive, multinational armada of over 100 ships to crush these Portuguese interlopers at the port of Diu. But there was a slight technological gap. The coalition was still relying on older galley tactics, basically rowing really fast and trying to aggressively hug the enemy ships to board them. In the year 1509, the Portuguese simply dropped anchor in deep water, looked at the massive swarm of incoming boats, and used their revolutionary heavy bronze cannons to blast the coalition fleet into absolute toothpicks from a mile away. With that single, ridiculously overpowered naval victory in 1509, a tiny European nation seized total control of the Indian Ocean and launched the era of global colonialism. The Battle of Talus. You are probably reading this script on a glowing rectangle, but the only reason the modern world ever had printed books, written documents, or CVS receipts comes down to a forgotten clash in modern-day Kyrgyzstan. In the year 751 AD, the aggressively expanding Abbasid Caliphate collided head-on with the absolute juggernaut that was the Tang dynasty of China. The Arabs won a decisive victory, which is cool for their borders, but the real prize was way nerdier. During the retreat, the Arab forces captured a handful of Chinese prisoners who just so happened to be highly skilled papermakers. Prior to this massive fight in 751 AD, Europe and the Middle East were still writing on dead sheepskin, parchment, or mashed-up river reeds, papyrus, which was absurdly expensive. The Islamic world essentially committed the greatest act of industrial espionage in history. They took the Chinese secret, industrialized the papermaking process, and eventually spread it to Europe, officially sparking the global explosion of literacy, science, and the Renaissance. The Battle of Sekigahara. If you want to understand why modern Japan is the way it is, You have to look at one incredibly tense afternoon where a guy cured his friend's indecision with a musket. Japan had been locked in a brutal, bloody civil war for over a century. Two massive coalitions met in a fog-covered valley to finally decide who would rule the nation. It was a complete, grinding stalemate until midday. The leader of the Eastern Army, Tokugawa Ieyasu, had secretly been sending letters to a young, extremely hesitant commander on the enemy side named Kobayakawa Hideaki, trying to get him to switch teams. Hideaki just sat on a nearby hill, biting his nails, completely refusing to pick a side. Finally, in the year 1600, Tokugawa got so absolutely sick of waiting that he ordered his own men to fire their muskets directly at Kobayakawa's position on the hill. Startled into action by his friend shooting at him, Kobayakawa panicked, ordered his 15,000 men to charge down the hill, and violently attacked his own allies. The Western Army completely collapsed, Tokugawa seized total power, and Japan went into 250 years of peaceful isolation, all because of one aggressive warning shot in 1600. The Battle of Yarmouk. Right after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the newly formed Rashidun Caliphate marched north into Syria. The Byzantine Empire, acting like a global superpower annoyed by a mosquito, responded by sending a massive, heavily armored army of up to 80,000 men to swat them away. The Muslim army was massively outnumbered, but they had a cheat code, a commander named Khalid ibn al-Walid, a tactical genius who had literally never lost a battle. The fighting dragged on for 6 grueling days. On the final day, in the year 636 AD, Khalid realized the weather was about to get terrible and decided to weaponize it. A blinding sandstorm blew directly into the faces of the Byzantine soldiers, completely filling their eyes with grit. While they were busy coughing and rubbing their eyes, Khalid launched a massive flanking maneuver, violently driving the panicked, blinded Roman legions straight backwards off a steep ravine. Pushing an entire army off a cliff in 636 AD permanently ended Roman rule in the Middle East and laid out the red carpet for the spread of Islam.